Thanks to Storyblocks for sponsoring this video. The Sony a7 III came out in April of 2018, and while I didn't know it at the time, it would turn out to be the most important gadget I would ever buy. I started my YouTube channel in August of 2016 as a hobby alongside a sports photography business. The cameras we were using for work, like the Canon 5D Mark III and 7D Mark II, also had decent video capabilities and thus would serve well as YouTube cameras on the side. Now, while I did make some videos about cameras and photography, the bulk of my content in those first 18 months was what I'd categorize as absurdist variety programming, meaning it didn't do particularly well, but the camera videos did. So in February of 2018, I decided to pivot to the photo video niche and focus hard on making that work. At some point before this, I switched to the Panasonic GH5 for making my YouTube videos, as it started to become tedious switching the Canon cameras from sports photography mode to YouTube mode every day. Coincidentally, it was also in February 2018 that the a7 III was announced. This might have been the first camera that I ever felt any hype or excitement about. I'd sampled some Sony lenses the year prior and borrowed the a7R III for a week in early 2018, but the features this new camera was offering at that price point seemed like it was finally going to be the moment I switched completely from DSLR to mirrorless. So I put a pre-order in. Meanwhile, my transition to camera content on YouTube was fine. I was mostly making videos about the GH5, trying to solve the autofocus, testing each firmware iteration to see if the contrast-based pulsing had been reduced. I covered some lenses for the system, some flashes, and made some really basic post-production tutorials. These videos were certainly doing better than my surrealist comedy masterpieces of yore, but my future on YouTube was still quite uncertain. Then in early May, I got the call informing me that I had finally risen to the top of the exceedingly long pre-order queue for the a7 III and that I could come pick up the camera. I filmed that transaction and the unboxing, and then posted a first impressions video expressing my excitement about the unprecedented value proposition this camera presented. Now this is the part in the story where I tell you how that video catapulted me to YouTube fame, how I immediately got a call from Sony offering me 9 figures to be on the next box of Alpha wheat cereal, and how the subscribers and views rolled in too rapidly to track. Well, no, that video bombed. Even now, nearly 6 years later, it's still one of my worst performing videos of 2018. But that lesson heavily advised the content direction that followed. I learned then that making a video about the latest gadget without having anything meaningful to add to the conversation is not the key to YouTube success. But more on that later. After that video, I went back to making content about my journey to better understanding cameras. I would find something that wasn't working as intended or a concept that I didn't fully grasp, research it, test it, and then post my findings on YouTube. And in 2018, that involved a lot of talk of lenses, optics, depth of field, crop sensors, and many, many more videos on autofocus. And it was looking over the analytics of these videos that helped me understand that people were finding value in the testing I was doing. I've always had a relentless interest in tinkering with my devices to try and figure out each of their specific quirks. Now, while my audience was growing throughout this time, it was still quite small comparatively, and I attributed this to the fact that I was likely only attracting the nerdiest of nerds who were willing to suffer through my 20-minute tirades of speed talking and bargain basement animations. That is until I retrained my sights on the a7 III. I'd been using that camera during this time, but not talking about it much. I was still shooting the majority of my videos with the GH5 and had my best performing video up to that point discussing Micro Four Thirds. So I guess I just assumed my audience wasn't interested in Sony cameras. But after using the a7 III for about 6 months, there were plenty of things that were bugging me and a bunch of quirks I discovered that I felt had insufficient coverage. So I made a few videos. I posted stuff about face detection issues over HDMI and some workarounds I implemented, weird things in the menu that turned off when you shot in 4K, and what it was like live streaming with the a7 III. And when you know it, people found those videos much more helpful than some bozo showing them terrible top-down footage of me unboxing my new camera. But there was something that was still eating at me. Why are there so many damn picture profiles on this camera, and which one is best? I must have watched nearly 100 videos and perused countless web pages in search of this answer, and I got nowhere. I learned that everyone had their own special combination of magical settings that they preferred. If it's daytime, I use Cine 1, but I set the need to 630 seconds and shoot only in black and white. And at nighttime, I like PPR for movie gamma, but don't forget to adjust the retro encabulator. But there was no reason behind the madness. It was all subjective. And my brain does not do well with subjective answers to technological mysteries. So I tried to solve it myself. I published a video about Sony picture profiles using an improvised chart I made that went from pitch black to increasing intensities of white. I didn't know at the time that I was merely making a terrible Wish.com version of the Xyla 21 dynamic range test chart. I didn't even know there was such a thing. But I used this to develop a better visual understanding of what each profile was doing to the curve and how noise was affected. And in that video, I shared my hopefully slightly less subjective opinion on what I believe to be the best picture profile for the A7 III based on my semi-scientific, mildly fallacious testing. And yes, if you're still waiting for the pivotal A7 III moment of my YouTube journey, that was probably it. I followed up with supplementary videos about chroma subsampling and matching picture profiles, each of which performed 8 to 10 times better than my average video at the time. And that's when I started seeing my name pop up all over the place in the camera world. Geraldine Dunn says you should use your Sony camera like this. Geraldine Dunn doesn't like it when you do that. And it's also what put me on Sony's radar. When I went to NAB in 2019, I discovered that the people at the Sony booth had heard about me and were planning to reach out to discuss some things. It was quite exciting. Those conversations eventually led to me being sent cameras early for review, which would allow me to make videos about the latest gadget on launch day. And this is the main reason why the A7 III is the most important device I ever purchased. Had I not gotten the humility stomped into me when I tried to make a banger A7 III video back in the spring of 2018 with nothing meaningful to say, I might have incorrectly used this new opportunity of having Sony send me cameras to the same pointless effect. In fact, it might surprise you to know that I made very little Sony-related content between those picture profile videos of early 2019 and the launch of the A7S III in mid-2020. I spent most of the time in between tinkering with my new Blackmagic Pocket 4K and being a little too obsessed with the cinema cameras from Canon. And most of my mirrorless camera videos were for products from Panasonic and Fuji. Of course, these days I'm known more as a Sony guy, and that probably has a lot to do with the launch of the A7S III. It was because of that camera that I finally switched to Sony for YouTube production, and my review of the Sony A7S III is my most viewed video of all time. So why isn't this video about that camera? Why isn't the A7S III my most important gadget? Because that was just an evolution of a formula I started developing 2 years prior, brought about by the A7 III. My A7S III review was merely my best effort to take all of the elements from those separate, dedicated videos that people appreciated about the A7 III and incorporate them into one review. I talked about SD card interactions, did autofocus tests, checked for HDMI quirks, looked for 4K limitations, and of course, I busted out the Xyla 21, which I had acquired for the making of that video to provide more accurate analysis of dynamic range and to give a less fallacious opinion on which picture profile was best. In fact, the success of those previous Sony A7 III uploads gave me the courage to make a 50-minute video discussing just picture profiles and exposure on the A7S III, and those videos had massive impacts on my channel's growth and trajectory. These days, it's rare to find a camera review of mine that doesn't include large sections dedicated to dynamic range or other nerdy numbers. And while it's getting harder and harder in recent months to get excited about fractional increases in those same test results, and while my interest in reviewing cameras has certainly decreased, it is, however, easy to reflect on my life at the close of 2023 and be grateful for where this camera tinkering odyssey has taken me. When the A7 III came out, I had just under 2,000 subscribers on YouTube and cleared only $98 in revenue that month. Since then, YouTube has brought financial security for my family, a lovely home to live in, and an outlet for my madness that I'm told has been helpful to a great number of people on their own camera-related journeys. I can't easily express in words how unbelievably fortunate I feel to have had this opportunity. And while it can't all be singly attributed to the Sony A7 III, I do indeed look at that camera as the chief instigator and teacher of hard lessons that's led me to where I am now, which is what makes it the most important piece of equipment I've ever bought. 6 out of 10. And while I'm being nostalgic about camera YouTube, the most important sponsor this channel has ever had would easily be Storyblocks. They've been sponsoring my videos since 2019, and they made it possible to do what I do. So huge thank you to them. And if you're not familiar, Storyblocks is a stock media platform that offers unlimited downloads of diverse and high-quality content for one predictable subscription cost. No more expensive pay-per-clip pricing. Just pick a plan, pay that fee, and that's it. And you'll enjoy a library of over 1 million HD and 4K video files, images, and motion graphics templates. And speaking of those graphics, Storyblocks has expanded their library beyond just Premiere Pro and After Effects, and now include customizable DaVinci Resolve templates for motion graphics and animated sequences, an essential tool for creating professional-looking videos at scale. And it's always easy to find what you're looking for on Storyblocks because the platform is very intuitive and new content is commissioned frequently to ensure you'll have fresh assets to satisfy your project. So to get started with unlimited stock media downloads at one set price, head to storyblocks.com/undone or just click the link in the description.